Welcome back to the Legal Brief, the show where we crush the various legal myths and misinformation surrounding various areas of the gun world. I'm your host, Adam Kraut, and today we're talking about a Pennsylvania Township's attack on a gun range that's been there for over 50 years. SB Tactical, the originator of the pistol stabilizing brace, set the bar for innovation and product development in the PDW pistol category. From the insanely popular SB-M4 to the adjustable SB-A3 and even kits for pump-action firearms, SB Tactical braces are available for a wide variety of firearm platforms in fixed, adjustable, and side-folding models. To get 15% off your legally transported and carried pistol braces, use the code TGC15 over at sb-tactical.com. Before we get started, I'm running for the NRA Board of Directors and I need your help. Head on over to adamkraut.com or click the link down in the description to grab a petition and let your voice be heard. Now, back to me. While most of the cases we discuss involve a law being passed to prohibit the exercise of the right to keep and bear arms, I think this may be the first time we discussed it from a zoning context. Local governments are typically in charge of dictating the zoning of a particular area of land within its borders. In this case, we're talking about a gun range that's been operating for the better part of a century and how the township is trying to put a stop to it. Our plaintiffs in this case, William Drummond, his LLC, and the Second Amendment Foundation, are suing Robinson Township, which is just west of Pittsburgh, and its zoning officer, alleging that the township was violating Drummond's Second and 14th Amendment rights. A quick backstory on the property is in order. Drummond's grandfather began to operate a range on the property back in 1967. According to the complaint, it consisted of a clubhouse and a restaurant, as well as living quarters of its manager, the manager's family, 4 trap ranges, 3 skeet ranges, a 25-yard pistol range, a 100-yard rifle sighting range, and a 400-yard rifle range. In 1972, Drummond's grandfather died and left the property to his wife, who in 1990 sold the property to Drummond's uncle while retaining ownership of the club itself. In 2008, Drummond's uncle became a prohibited person and the gun club ceased to operate, until 8 years later, in 2016, when a company, Iron City, leased the property through the end of 2017. That's when Drummond began to lease the property from his uncle and this current fiasco began. You see, prior to this current lawsuit, the township had tried 2 separate times to shut the gun club down. The first attempt came in 1993 when the township brought a nuisance action against the club. In that lawsuit, the township admitted that the gun club was lawfully operating under the township's zoning ordinance. However, it had 3 complaints. The first was the discharge of automatic weapons, which was going to cease the following year anyway, the club's hours of operation, and projectiles leaving the premises and striking nearby properties, which the court found not to be true. The case only took about, 4 years, and in 1997, the court found in favor of the gun club. In 2016, while Iron City was operating the club, the township tried to shut it down again. Iron City had been authorized to operate the property as a club for its members with a condition that no other commercial operations were allowed on site, including but not limited to sales, gun testing, rentals, or other commercial endeavors. It also prohibited activities related to any federal firearms licenses at the club. In June and July of that year, the township served Iron City with 2 cease and desist notices, followed by a decision to revoke its permit based on complaints that the club was selling, get this, water, targets, and ammunition. They even had an undercover police operation which confirmed that the club sold targets and ammo. Iron City appealed to the Court of Common Pleas and ultimately prevailed, which brings us to the current legal fight. In January of this year, Drummond spoke to zoning officer for Robinson Township, advising him of his intentions to continue the club's operations and asked what would be required to allow him to do that and remodel. Dorsey, the zoning officer, told Drummond to write him a detailed description of his plans, which he did, and then Dorsey disappeared. He never responded to Drummond's letter or numerous follow-up phone calls. In February of this year, unbeknownst to Drummond, someone involved in the prior nuisance suit requested expedited action on restrictive zoning amendments targeting the gun club at a township meeting. 2 days later, the zoning officer told Drummond he would have to file a zoning application, but it need not be done immediately. A week after that prior meeting, the township held a special meeting for the apparent purposes of considering restrictive zoning to halt the gun club's operations. Of course, nobody told Drummond that this meeting was being held, and yes, the zoning officer attended. It was not until a few weeks later in mid-March before Drummond was able to meet with the township zoning officer to discuss the plans for the range. He was told to complete the zoning application, which he did, but was never informed of the pending zoning change. A few days later, Drummond learned of another special meeting, which he ended up attending, and the township tabled its efforts to rezone the property. Unfortunately for him, the township ultimately adopted amendments to the zoning ordinance in early April, prior to rejecting his application, which, by the way, had been in their possession for over 30 days. The amendments included, among other things, defining the term sportsmen's clubs to mean nonprofit entity formed for the conservation of wildlife or game, and to provide members with opportunities for hunting, fishing, or shooting, and regulating the clubs to only allow pistol ranges, skeet shooting, trap and skeet, and rimfire rifles. Yup, no center fire. And that brings us to today. The lawsuit alleges that restricting the operation of so-called sportsmen's clubs to nonprofit entities, along with a blanket prohibition on the use of centerfire rifles, without sufficient regard to their suitability at a particular location, infringes on the right to keep and bear arms. It further argues that by treating sportsmen's clubs differently from other businesses, solely on account of activity secured by the Second Amendment, the township zoning ordinance violates the right to equal protection in the exercise of a fundamental right. The suit also claims that defendants deprived Drummond of his property interest by frustrating and delaying his application to operate the gun club, all while they pulled a bait and switch to deny his application. And for good measure, the suit claims the right to pursue a livelihood is a privilege or immunity of federal citizenship that cannot be abridged by state actors under the 14th Amendment, which is exactly what the township is doing. Drummond is seeking a permanent injunction against Robinson Township from the enforcement of its new zoning ordinance, along with an order commanding the defendants to issue him all the required permits to operate the club. And, like any good lawsuit, he wants his attorney's fees. It appears, based on the defendants' actions, particularly the fact that they knew Drummond was submitting a zoning application but failed to advise him of their plan, that the township may be in for another smackdown from the courts. Of course, with any litigation, we don't know how this is going to pan out, but we will be following it. That's it for this episode. If you learned anything from this show, help us out and hit that like button. Make sure you share it around with your friends. Don't forget to get subscribed, and if you enjoyed the video, consider supporting us via the links down in the video description. Be sure to check out the Gun Collective podcast on iTunes, and as always, thanks for watching. Which is just west of Harrisburg, and its zoning officer... Yeah. Pittsburgh. I said Harrisburg, didn't I? Well, it would be west of Harrisburg, too. Which is just west of Pittsburgh.
One more time.
Which is just west of Pittsburgh. Which is just west of Pittsburgh.
Which is just west of Pittsburgh.
Which is just west of Pittsburgh. And the Second Amendment Foundation are suing...
Damn it.
The suit claims that the right to possess a livelihood and, for good measure, one more time, or immunity of the federal citizenship, one more time. That's it for this episode. If you liked... Don't forget to get subscribed, and if you enjoyed the video...
The shirts worn in today's video on the Gun Collective have been provided by Patriot Patch. Closed captions have also been brought to you by Patriot Patch Company. Be sure to click the link in the video description to check out all of their great products, including their cleaning mats.